Okay, we are now being recorded. So I don't know what everybody sees. I have a funny view. What does everybody see?
Looks fine.
You look fine, yeah.
Okay, not sure. Okay, so yesterday the Alter Rebbe was talking. Give me a second. It's still not right. Okay, I'm gonna have to cancel it. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so yesterday the Alter Rebbe was saying that the reason why the person doesn't feel the creation every millisecond is because God has the very same God who's creating. He's also putting up screens and veils and contractions and retaining and restraining his energy at exactly the same time, and it's from exactly the same place, heavenly place. So it is the idea is that God wanted to create, but he didn't want us to feel the creation. That's the idea. He didn't want us to feel that we're being created. Why? Because then we would lose our identity. Then we wouldn't feel that it's something that we accomplished, but rather we just feel we're an extension of God. And we discussed yesterday that it's actually a chesed, it's actually a kindness, if you think about it, because he wanted us to feel independent. He didn't want us to feel like sheep. He didn't want us to feel like angels, where we have no free will or anything like that. He wanted us to just feel and be independent. Now, what he said, however, from God's perspective, he doesn't see the independence at all, because if something comes from the same source, it can't conceal itself. And we learned yesterday that both chesed, giving the energy, and gevura, restraining, taking back or concealing the energy, came from exactly the same source. So therefore, from God's perspective, there's no concealment. It's only from our perspective that there is any form of concealment. We view ourselves as independent. Truth be told, it's malarkey. We're not independent. We're not independent, and we are completely created by God every millisecond, and without God's creation, we would be naught. That's pretty much where we left off yesterday. So and that's why we're insensitive. We're insensitive to the force that creates us, to the energy that creates us, and we're able to think independently. Once again, we're able to transgress God's will. But it's not truth. It's not truth at all. It's just a it's a perception. It's God did something that David Copperfield could only dream of. He created an illusion that's so great that we're in the middle of an illusion. We think we're not being created constantly, and we think we're something. Right? We think, and by the way, that's why probably in the Talmud and other places it talks about ego, the arrogance, because that really shows, you could think it, that you're independent, but when you have an ego, that shows that I'm independent, etc. So now we're holding chapter 5. So chapter 5, he says, concerning with regards to what we just learned, that creation comes about through tzimtzum. It doesn't come direct, but rather it gets concealed, which enables created beings to view themselves as independent. Our sages have explained the following. So in there's a very famous medrash that says the following. Originally, God thought that he's going to create the world strictly with the attribute of gevura, with the attribute of stern judgment. And that's based on the verse, the first couple of chapters. It says, Bereshis bara Elokim, et hashamayim. Elokim is Gevura. Elokim, the tetragrammaton is chesed, is a giving. Elokim is holding back or concealing. So it says that, so it's based on that verse that the Medrash says that, and originally God wanted to create the world, the Midas Hadin, with strict judgment. And that's what is strict judgment, that you'll be judged strictly. God saw that the world could not live that way. I mean, the Medrash Rabbah explains that every time that we did every time we committed a sin, we'd get punished immediately. So they saw that nobody's going to survive the strict judgment. So Shotaf by Midas Rachman. He partnered with the Gevura, with the severity, with the din, with the judgment. He partnered chesed, kindness. So so that's what the Midrash says. The Alter Rebbe is kind of has a question, and he just answered the question here. The question is, we know God is a benevolent God, 13 attributes of mercy, etc., etc. Why would he have in mind to create a stern world? Why would the all-merciful God, compassionate God, a forgiving God, a kind God, the El is God of kindness, right? God who protects, that's Shin Daled Yud. Why would God want to create the world with stern judgment? It doesn't sound like him at all, right? If you know a really, really nice person, kind person within and without, you wouldn't view them as a disciplinarian. And here it's saying God wanted to be a disciplinarian. It doesn't sound like it. Yes, Amy. You have a question? You raised your hand.
Nope, sorry. Fiddling around with the settings.
Oh, okay. So why would God do that? So he says so now he says we understand somewhat. We understand something here. So based on what we've explained in the past few chapters, that God wanted that the human beings should feel themselves completely independent. And because of that, he wanted symptom. And that's what it means. He wanted judgment. Judgment is symptom. When you give something, it's chesed. When you take it away, it's gevura. When you give charity, that's chesed, you're giving. When you decide not to give charity, as an example, that's gevura. So God said, you know what, I'm going to hide my energy. I'm going to condense my energy. I'm going to this my energy, that my energy. So the person should feel independent. So that's what he wanted. Not that he wanted a stern judgment where he's a disciplinarian, but rather he wanted the human being to feel comfortable in their in their skin sack and feel independent. However, right, he saw that the world could not endure, could not exist. Why? Because the whole purpose of creation, as we've discussed before at length, the entire purpose of creation is, right, to make this world a place for God to live, to make this netherworld an abode for God. And if there's too much judgment, or if there's only judgment, if it's only symptom, then it's going to be such an arduous task. It's going to be close to impossible. If you have nothing, if you don't have a scintilla of feeling of godliness, then you're truly going to feel independent to the point where it's so difficult to be godly. So that's why God said, you know what? It's not going to work that way. I'm going to have to add a little bit of rachamim, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of mercy, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of giving. And the Alter Rebbe says, what was the giving? What was the chesed? He says, so the first thing he did was bring tzaddikim into the world. Adam, Noah, right? So he brought these righteous people into the world, and so that shows you can be godly. You have an example of how godly a human being should be. With Adam, with Noah, Methuselah, Methuselah. So he brought righteous people into the world. He also brought wonders and signs and miracles where people say, wow, look what happened, look what happened. That's chesed. That he wanted to show the people that there is something. He wanted to show us that, hold on, you think you're wholly independent? Let me tell you, there's more at play here. And therefore, when you do a miracle and nature is suspended for the moment, people will say, aha, there's a greater hand in this, and it must be God. And that's what he accomplished the same thing by producing tzaddikim. And he says regarding this, and he says, and it's once again, this is our above our pay grade. This is not something that we understand, God's ways, etc., etc. And he's going to say that even the greatest man, the greatest prophet that ever lived, he couldn't grasp it properly, right? As we'll see. So he says that it's above our pay grade, as it's stated in the Zohar, above in holiness. In the world of Atzilus, which is much higher than the other three worlds, there is right and there is left. There is chesed and gevura, right? So he says in the world of Atzilus, which is much loftier than a human being's comprehension, right? Way, way above, you have this concept of chesed and gevura, and because in Atzilus, God and his attributes and his causations are one. And he says, Moshe Rabbeinu, his soul may have resonated in Atzilus. He says, but however, his prophecies that he had was not from Atzilus. He says, so his soul is in Atzilus, but whenever he had a prophecy, it was actually came down in the world of Bria. So even Moshe could not fully comprehend God's creation ex nihilo, from nothing to something. He couldn't comprehend God's the way God contracted and by the way, the sages debate about this contraction in a great length. You know, was it a literal contraction? Was it is it a does it mean literally or does it mean figuratively? What does it mean? What does it mean? So the sages, you know, and they discuss it. There's books on this, right? So Moshe didn't get it. It was above his pay grade also. So Moshe, the only way he understood properly chesed and gevura is how they came down into the next level. So we know there's something called the tree of life. So the tree of life, you have chesed on the right, gevura on the left, and you have tiferes. In fact, you have it on the screen right here with Steve Levy's picture. So you have on the right, you have chesed, on the left, you have gevura, and in the middle, where those yellow things come out, you have tiferes, which is compassion. Below chesed, you have something called hod. Below chesed, you have something called netzach, and below gevura, you have something called hod, H-O-D. And he says that, so they are derivatives of chesed and gevura. Moshe understood them very well. He got it through his prophecy and through his lofty levels of spiritual intellect. Moshe got the derivatives of chesed and gevura. The chesed and gevura itself, Moses had trouble with. Right? Moses he couldn't understand. And he says, so are we ever going to understand? Will we ever understand chesed and gevura the way it is without just understanding a derivative? It's something that comes down. Give me a sec, Steve. He says, yes. When a person passes and they were righteous, He says the reward from the righteous is that you'll be able to comprehend. You'll have a diffusion of vitality and light that comes from Chesed and Gevurah. And he says, and basically, the light, just like down here in this world, in order to survive, you need food, right? In my opinion, tofu is not food, but you need food, right? So too, up in heaven, you also need food. And he says, and the food is the understanding of lofty concepts of godliness, understanding the sources behind the Torah's mitzvahs. He says that is the food, and so that is a reward. I once told this. I once told this to somebody. I said, we won't say his name. I said, you realize when you get to heaven, right? He says, what are you studying all the time? I said, when you get to heaven, you're going to be studying all the time. He goes, no, I want to be downstairs at the bar. He says, I don't want to study all the time. I don't want that. So he says, so when a person who's actively, been righteous, been a good person, et cetera, when they pass, they're going to get an internal infusion of understanding, because that's what food is. Food is internal. Of understanding. It says you'll be able to understand. Godliness that you've never understood before. But he says something interesting, and he says, and where does this godliness that you'll understand, where does it come from? He says it will come from Chesed and Gevurah. That's where your understanding will come from. So Chesed and Gevurah will be your Chesed and Gevurah will be the source of where you get your information. Steve, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point when you said about Moshe, and I think we learn about it when it talks coming up about Manasseh and the women, how he has to go to Hashem and says, I'm going to have to get back to you and let you know what the decision is on how we have to allow you to own the land, to take the to be a woman to take the ownership of the land of Manasseh,
right?
Because they get awarded Manasseh because the father died, the husband died, the father died.
What's it got to do with Chesed and Gevurah?
Oh, it had to do with your idea of Moses, that he couldn't decide on his own.
Oh, okay.
Instruction.
Right.
I think the idea was just to talk about that even Moshe, in a simple thing of making the decision, he wouldn't even make the decision on his own about the tribe. So, you know what, you take the tribe, or you can't have it because you're a woman. The same thing when it came to creating the copper mirror. When he decided to make a decision and he made a poor decision, he had to retract his decision.
Right. So right, we see it twice in this week's Pasha. You're correct. Twice in this week's Pasha, Moshe, it was above his pay grade, and Moshe had to ask God. So he says, now going back to the text. Thank you, Steve. Going back to the text. However, when we're righteous, we will be rewarded. We'll be rewarded with understanding from the source of Chesed and Gevurah. And by the way, the more you're righteous in this world, the higher level you'll be. Whenever we say the neshama should have an aliyah, the neshama should be elevated. What we're saying is that your neshama be elevated to a higher level of knowledge. That's what we're saying. How you can only have a higher level of knowledge if you surpass the level you are at now. And that is done. The soul gets elevated in a couple of ways. One is the Kaddish. The other one is with the kids do, the children of the person, the grandchildren do good deeds, and that helps elevate the soul. But where do they decide what level you are when you come up to heaven? And that is, it's all based on your accomplishments. It's all based on your good deeds. And he says, and there in heaven, which Moshe couldn't understand on earth, but there in heaven, you'll understand the sod, the secrets, the mysteries of the 22 letters of the Torah. And these 22 letters of the Torah, he says, is also given from these two attributes. And he says from this lofty level, right, it will be food for the souls, food, mazon. And he says, so it will be an internal grasp of this stuff, and a knowledge once again of the secret of the 22 letters, and he says this is how he concludes. He says the Torah knowledge will be the food for the souls in Gan Eden, right? But the garments will be the mitzvahs. So one of the ways it's explained, which is interesting, is that just like an astronaut, when an astronaut goes up into space, the better the garments are, the better the astronaut will be able to stay outside in a very hostile environment. So, once they perfected more, you could do longer spacewalks, et cetera, et cetera. You can't go up to space if you don't have garments. If you go up with a Xenia suit, you'll probably die, right? And it could be a $2,000-$3,000 suit. You're still not gonna. You have to go with proper equipment, and likewise, going into heaven and be able to absorb this incredible dosages of Torah. You have to have the proper levushim. You have to have the proper clothing, and this clothing is the mitzvahs you've done. So the more mitzvahs you do, the better, so to speak, your astronaut suit is. Right. So like everything else, you need, as Lenny says, you need the right stuff. If you're a carpenter and you're lacking, certain tools, you're going to be a lousy carpenter. And if you're so here, our job is to do Torah and mitzvahs, and that gets you the level, and that will get you protection. The mitzvahs will get you the protection with your astronaut suit on. That's how we conclude chapter 5 in a nutshell. Are there any questions?
Rabbi, the soul
Yeah.
that goes up to heaven eventually comes back down to earth as a new birth. So, I'm asking you a question which you can't answer, of course. What happens in the middle before the soul comes down again?
Well, you're thinking very linear. This, right? God and creation. Time is a creation. Time is just a creation, like every other creation. God and God's domains are above time. They're above space. It's not spatial. It's not that the soul can be here and there at the same time and not detract from each other. We're talking about the spiritual realm. We're not talking about the physical realm where you're either here or there. But that is for a discussion in itself, which we'll have at some point. We'll discuss resurrection, reincarnation. We can get to that. But creation is a time. Time is a creation. Time is your creation. Time is a creation, right? The internet was Al Gore's creation. Time was God's creation.
Isn't he saying when he talks about the body and the birth coming together, the connection with the mother and the father